Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the TownSteel number TLL-L 2 3/8 backset Essen US26D Designer Series low rose style 2 3/8 backset passage function tubular lock with an Essen bladed lever and satin chrome. So we've got a passage set here. Let's take it out of the box and take a look at it. If it's typical TownSteel, it will have relatively simple and straightforward installation instructions. And indeed it does. Okay, so we've got that documentation. We're going to start with just a visual review of the hardware itself. And get an understanding of what all is included in here. So we have the Essen lever trim, and let's take a look at what that is first. Okay. Low profile rose is what they say, and it is indeed very short to the door. Short projection. Lever return spring seems to have a good return action on it. Comes back to vertical. Okay. Let's take some typical dimensional properties, and we're going to remove the contents of the box, and we're going to take a look at everything there. So, dimensional properties. I have the interior rose here, so we'll use that. 2.5 inch. They've got 2 and 17/32. Yeah, it looks just shy on 2.5. Maybe 2 and 15. Pardon me, 15. Yeah, 15/32. Looks just about 13/32. Yeah, on the thickness. Yes, that's right. For the projection, so very small, very nice. What I enjoy about these locks from TownSteel is they have a nice margin between the hole that's on the inside of the rose and how the lever mates to the face of it. Okay, really nice margin there. Very nice and attractive. I'm not going to force that rose all the way down because it just will have to be popped off. Okay. The entire passage set itself, it's not light, weighs about 2.4 pounds, 2.9 pounds. So there's some substance to everything that's in the package. So a visual tour of all the parts. This would be the exterior side. This will have these fixed mounting bolts that are here, and you're obviously going to run screws through the interior portion. This lever can indeed come off should you need it to. There's a set screw down in there. Okay, very typical and common sort of installation or assembly method there. Put that over here. The interior lever with its mounting base and its fixed spindle. And I'll tell you this, this is the same equipment that comes on their mortise locks. So this is the same caliber as what you would find on a grade 1 mortise lock from TownSteel. So, you know, that is definitely a good thing where you're getting the same build quality that you'd have on a lock that would be 3 times the cost. And then again, that rose, just handling marks there, that's all that's on there. Okay, so we move into the accessory pieces that we have. And so, just to back up, Essen lever, and then this is the low profile rose, or low rose style. That's exactly what they call it. Okay, this lock is also set up with a 2 3/8 latch bolt. Here it is. That bolt is intended to spin. It can go on any hand of door. The reason that it can go on any hand of door is I actually don't know. I don't know what would make this a handed unit, why they would allow that bolt to turn like that. Doesn't really matter. As soon as you put the faceplate on, it will, of course, stay in position. So you've got a 2 3/8 latch bolt. That's measured from the back side of the from the edge of the door to the center of the hole that's prepped in the door, 2 3/8. It's a little shy on that because we're missing the faceplate that would be mounted to the face of this. And speaking of that, it's here. This is going to give us a square corner installation. Very attractive look. Okay. That's going to be 1 inch by 2 1/4 tall. 2 1/4 tall, and then 1 inch wide. The latch bolt seems quite robust, quite heavy duty. What happens with people when they get decorative levers, inevitably, sooner or later, it's discontinued, whether it's 10 years or it's 25 years. And what generally fails are the latch bolts. This does seem to be a quite robust latch bolt, and I would expect many, many years of faithful service out of it. You're also going to get a strike plate. This is a 2 3/4 strike. We call these T-strikes. You can see, if you use your imagination, why we would call it that. 2 3/4 tall. Overall width, it's about 1 7/8 inches, but these are measured from the strikes are measured from the vertical center line of the screws to the edge of the lip. It's about 1 5/16 inches, and that's typical. About 1.5 inches. There is a lot of lip length there. I would certainly argue that they could get away with a shorter lip length. Excessive projecting hardware off the face of a door or a frame is never a good idea. I would argue that they could easily make this a little bit smaller, probably 3/16 smaller. They could get away with, and that would be a benefit to having that projection of the strike a little bit smaller. The advantage is if you have some thicker than average casing, well, that strike is going to be quite perfect. So that would be the advantage. Now we get into this piece of galvanized steel. I don't know what it is, but we're going to discover that in a moment. Latch support is what it's called. Okay, we'll figure that out. You've got your spindle assembly. It's a 2-piece assembly, and it gets threaded together. This is what would be called a swivel spindle, so that the sides can rotate independent of each other. And you'll need that for a proper installation. Okay. Then you're going to get your 4 screws, 2 for the latch, 2 for the strike. Then you're going to get the other 2 screws that will allow you to mount through the inside rows into those fixed mounting posts. Okay, and we'll go over that when we get to the installation instructions. Now, this latch support bracket, that is indeed a piece of equipment that is probably not, seeing where it goes and what it does. I now know what it does. So here's what it looks like. I don't see that it matters that you install it on either side. They show it on the exterior side. I would probably stick with installing it on the exterior side. There is installation instructions down below this video, so you'll be able to see watch along with it. So what really happens with this is this piece of steel is going to just fit down over this. Your mounting screws are going to go through the plate, and it's obviously connected to the latch bolt back here. The reason that that's there is it is absolutely going to help prevent, if I were to take this lever and I were to aggressively turn it, I'm going to be able to then start turning the entire latch bolt to the point where I'm going to start to break the lock. This piece of equipment is there to help mitigate that sort of problem. And will it, of course, ultimately prevent any sort of excessive vandalistic type overturning of the lever or knob? No, it won't, but it will sure help a lot. I would rather have that piece there because you can get the concept where I really can't, if I'm trying to spin this, it doesn't want to move. And in fact, I have to really put some force on it just to get it to move at all. But it's quite solidly in place. Okay, and that's going to help keep this latch bolt from as the lever is being turned to being torqued like this, or being torqued like this, depending on how you're moving it. So that's what that's for. Ingenious in the sense that interior decorative residential latch sets are a pain in the South 40 because they're maintenance beasts. Lots of setting of set screws, lots of coming back and tightening them up. They look beautiful, but they don't really work long term, and especially privacy sets. They do get cranked and torqued, and after a couple of years, they don't work as well. It's just the bottom line, and you've spent all this money. I would argue that this is an upgrade to the standard type of format. Obviously, they recognize that there was a shortcoming in how this stuff is put together, and obviously addressed it. So let's now move to the extended description information down below. It says the Designer Series tubular lock offers a variety of trim selection, which we'll get to. It comes with a heavy-duty latch. Yeah, I would argue that this is, I bet that this would pass a grade 1 test, a million cycle test. I'd have no doubt about it. Available in passage, privacy, single and double dummy functions. 2 3/8 backset. You can order these all with 2 3/4. Low row style is the L for low. It's a passage. The Essen trim is plated lever trim. That would mean that this is made of solid brass. They don't. Satin chrome finish. Yes, this would be made of solid brass. So they're calling this. Well, it's satin chrome, and satin chrome plating would be done over a brass base material. Now, they apparently have zinc alloy that's available, and I don't know what of the levers they would do in zinc. Obviously, the stainless steel will be the stainless base material. All other levers should be made out of brass. They do list a zinc. If I was going to guess, I see satin nickel done over zinc often. Additional product information. 1 3/4 is the standard door thickness. The question becomes, will it work on an 1 3/8 door? I'm tempted to say that it will. It absolutely will. First of all, I don't see how you can come to market and make residential locks for 1 3/4 thick doors only. But given the fact that our spindle is going to go through the latch bolt and then thread together and have the space to travel inside of the lock, the lever itself, I would say that this is going to absolutely work. Okay, and the fact that you can thread that to the point where you draw it in together. So they don't list it available for 1 3/8, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. 2 3/8 or 2 3/4 backsets. The rose is made of wrought steel, brass, or stainless. Same for the lever is brass, stainless, or zinc alloy. The faceplate is brass or stainless steel. We covered the size of the strike and the latch bolt. Privacies will have a plunger type, which would be a push button. On the inside rose, there'll be a hole drilled in the rosette where you can have a privacy pin that you would press. Available finishes: satin chrome, satin stainless, oil rubbed, polished nickel, satin nickel, polished chrome, polished brass, satin brass, polished stainless. The functions mentioned earlier, and it is ADA compliant. So this lever design will work on any applications you have that are going to demand, of course, compliance with ADA A117 federal law. In fact, it's not a code, it's a law. And that TownSteel has been manufacturing locks for a long time, 25 years. This carries a 10-year warranty. That's pretty darn good. I cannot think of a residential lock manufacturer that has a 10-year warranty on an interior lock. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move to the documents that are posted down below, getting us into the how to order it, the installation instructions, the product brochure, and the template. So let's move on to the how to order, because that will then lead us into the product brochure. Okay, now in the how to order section, they tell us, they give a simple overview exactly what it is that you're looking at in terms of their trim series, but really it defines the function as well. So TLL is a passage, TLP is a privacy, TDS is a dummy single, and TDP is a dummy pair, TLE is an exit. So passage and privacy are probably understood by you. A single dummy is literally just a single lever that will have its rows. It's going to have its trim, and then it's going to simply surface mount to the face of the door. This material is surface mounted, and it's a single dummy. Where would you use that? You would use that in a pair of closet doors, you know, that have that pull open, maybe have ball or roller latches in the top, and it's just a closet. Okay, no active trim at all. It's just pull the doors open, push them closed. You can then have a full dummy where you're going to have exactly this arrangement on one side and then the single dummy on the other. It all mates together. And while I don't have a full dummy here, I would expect that there is some provision where that trim is not active. It's always rigid, as would be the case for the single dummy. Generally what happens is that with the mounting plate, this is made rigid. Is what is done here, so that this cannot be made to rotate at all. You don't want to be rotating dummy levers. An exit is literally a one-sided passage. Okay, no trim on the outside, no evidence of there being anything on the outside, and just a there must be a latch bolt and then some apparatus to attach the lever to that would fit inside the hole, would be my guess. It has to work that way somehow. Step 2 are the rows. You can go with the different rose designs, and we're going to look at the product catalog in a little bit. The back sets are 2 3/8 or 2 3/4, and then your lever, and then your finish. And once you know your function, what rose you'd like, what back set you'd like, what trim you'd like, and what color you'd like, you have a complete lock. Okay, so that's easy stuff. Let's move to the product brochure. This document is certainly not a new document. This document's been around a while, but nonetheless shows everything that's necessary to see. I don't expect that it's changed at all. And as you scroll through there, you're going to see all of the different lever designs. Looking at this, I can definitely tell you that the Essen lever is a common lever, especially nowadays. Other manufacturers, they all have a similar flattened lever like this, known by different names. The other expected culprits, so to speak, are certainly going to be that Brighton. You'll find that style, as is the Caesars. You'll find both of those by decorative manufacturers. But the more modern trim, the Bergen, is going to be very common. There is the Dublin that's there. There is a definite availability in the marketplace of these square, rectangular, geometric shape sort of levers. Very modern. Can't say that they'd be very pleasant in the hand, but they do look nice. On the second page, there are some levers that are quite unique to them. The Latvia, I've never seen a lever quite like that by anyone else. They do have that interesting NSL2 trim, which is a very narrow trim. It's basically a turn ring is what it is. So that might be very interesting if you, for some reason, did not want anything projecting off the face of the door. You could certainly have that. You know, I can envision reasons why you'd want that. You might have a door that's going to open, and you simply don't want any trim projecting into an already narrow opening. We have people who have a bedroom, and then they have a hallway going into a straight would be a closet, and they want that door to open. But that, unfortunately, that access to the closet is already quite narrow. Because on one side there is a lavatory, and they'll really want to keep the projecting hardware to a minimum. So maybe that's where, or it could be just an incredibly modern look that you're looking for. That Oviedo knob is there. It's like an egg-shaped sort of knob. That's relatively common. Continuing to scroll through, you're going to be able to see additional levers. They have thumb turns that are listed here, and I don't know why the thumb turns apply at all. Those would apply to mortise locks. Unless they have those modified to work with these latch bolts, but I don't believe that is the case at all. I believe that those thumb turns don't apply to tubular passage and privacy sets. When you go further through, you'll see trims made of stainless steel. Because the base material is different, you can do different things with stainless steel. So you'll find some geometric shapes there that are inherently different. They don't cast stainless, they cast brass, that molten material into a form. So you'll be able to have different shapes, and if you're looking for purely stainless, you're going to want to certainly have a stainless base material rather than have a brass based material that, you know, you're trying to emulate stainless with a nickel perhaps, or even a satin chrome. There is a push-pull latch that's there, and that's interesting. You wouldn't really see that in residential applications. You do see push-pull latches installed in hospitals all the time because you can easily open those up without using your hands, is really what the concept is of a push and pull latch. Although it also makes it easy just pushing the door open with your hand. There's no twisting at all. You can put your shoulder into the trim, you know, making it easy when someone is walking into a patient's room with a handful of material. Again, additional levers as we scroll through. There's more thumb turns. And then they show the sectional roses that are there as well. We have the L for low. There is even one that's thinner. I don't know how that would work on a tubular lock. Then they get into some keyed functions, and I'm going to imagine that these are mortise locks in this catalog. This product catalog must be, they're certainly mortise locks. So this product catalog applies to many other things other than tubular locks. So be mindful of that. We've got some, and maybe by the time you're seeing this video, that information will no longer be there. We'll just pull that out if we can elegantly do so. Now, the key thing about TownSteel is you're going to be able to use the same levers on the keyed mortise lock, which is probably why it's in there as well, and have that flow through the rest of the space. So if you want to put a mortise lock on your front door, on your garage door, if this is a residential application, sure. The union lever that you pick, you can run that through the rest of the house on your tubular locks. And that's when I had said earlier that this is the same material from a mortise lock. That is certainly a tip-off that will be thoroughly compatible. So that winds up the product catalog, except to say that they do show different finishes that are available there. Now, the template and the installation instructions are really the next documents to get ourselves into, and let's do so. The installation instructions are certainly included, as is the template, with your hardware. So let's address these different pieces of equipment and just talk about how they'll be mounted and go together, and we will wrap this video up. Let's first talk about the template, because that's what you'll need to do first, and we'll touch on anything that I see that is important, and I do immediately. So first of all, this template, if you're new to drilling doors for hardware, let's have a discussion about it. If you're not, then sorry to about waste the next 5 minutes of your life. So the fact of the matter is, this is a typical template. It's showing you the proper back set that you're going to have for both a 2 3/8 and a 2 3/4. This is going to require a 2 1/8 inch hole that will go completely through the door, and it is going to require a 1 inch bore in the edge of the door. It's going to require a 2 1/4 tall by 1 inch wide prep in the face. It's going to require that to be 5/32 of an inch deep. Okay, all the data is there. There's lots of lines. Lots of lines there. The advantage is that it will show you where your positioning, I suppose, needs to be for the hole in the edge of the door. You know, that hole for the latch bolt is going to be in the center of the thickness of the door. That's the bottom line. That's where you're going to drill your 1 inch hole. So when I would drill locks, when I do door work, I drill the 2 1/8 inch hole first. I will mark the edge of the door to the center of the hole according to my backset. Now, something very interesting that you're going to see on this template, you're going to see low bevel, three vertical lines, low bevel, then another line, then high bevel. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it really requires a definition of the term backset. So this, depending on your lock, you have either a 2 3/8 or a 2 3/4 backset. We've already discussed that. This is 2 3/8. If this was 3/8 longer, it'd be 2 3/4. Okay, so your 2 1/8 hole is going to be 2 3/8 from the edge of the door to the center of the hole. But why do we have this low bevel and this high bevel? Well, there's a very important reason why that's the case. I'm going to make a quick sketch. Okay, we've got 3 doors drawn here. 3 edges of doors. Square edge, beveled edge, radiused, and rabbited. So the question becomes is, I want to drill my hole. What's the edge of the door? And it seems like it's not too important to understand, but it absolutely is crucial to understand. So with a square edge door, you can hook your tape measure here or here and go over to your backset and drill your hole. It doesn't matter. You're going to get the same location. Well, if you try that same logic on a beveled edge door, you hook your tape measure here, go over 2 3/8. You hook your tape measure here and go over 2 3/8. Now those holes are not in the same position. The same logic goes with a radiused edge door or even a rabbited door. Okay, so the industry defines backset as the edge of the door to the center of the hole, but more specifically it defines it as the center of the thickness of the door to the edge to the center of the hole, the center of the thickness of the door. And the reason that that is nice is because we don't care how thick the door is according to our definition, and we don't care the treatment on the edge of the door. The center of the door, I've put little dots there. Okay? Basically, these dots are going to be in alignment all the way down. They're going to be in the same position. The reason that this template has low bevel and high bevel is because where you place your tape measure, again, will be different. So those lines are compensating, depending on the side of the door that you're placing it on. Your low bevel will always be the push side of the door. If it's an exterior residential door that swings in, that's going to be the outside. Your high bevel is always the pull side of the door. Always the pull side. The definition of the bevel is 1/8 and 2. It's written 1/8 and 2. For every 2 inches in door thickness, that bevel will change by 1/8 of an inch. So if we had a straight edge placed across here, if that door was 2 inch thick, that dimension here would be 1/8 of an inch. This is 1 3/4 door, let's say, so it will be ever so slightly less. You can start to understand now if you put your tape measure on the high side and you put your tape measure on the low side and you go to 2 3/8, you're off. So if you're going to be going on the high side of the door, you need to increase that a little bit, almost a 1/16. And if you're on the low side of the door, well, you need to deduct almost a 1/16 of an inch because you're already biased towards the inside of the door from the center line, is what I'm driving at. Okay. So that's why those lines are there. It's very possible, it's very typical that you're going to have a square edge door, not to worry. However, if you put a square on the edge of your door and you can see it's clearly not a square edge door, then simply make the appropriate adjustment so that when you drill that hole, it's going to meet. I've owned every tool, literally, to prep doors. Everything from a $5 lock installation kit to a $250,000 CNC machine. I've owned everything. The way I do it is I have a $10 hole saw made by Morse or Norden or Irwin or Bosch, whoever. I do like Morse. Those are good hole saws. A good arbor, and I mark my hole, and I just drill halfway through to the point where the arbor bit breaches the other side. The reason I like the hole saw is because as soon as my hole saw hits the face of the door, it forces me to be straight. I can immediately tell if I'm cocked or if I'm not in alignment or perfectly perpendicular to the face of the door as I enter it, because I have that huge circumference of a 2 1/8 inch bit. Bimetal hole saws have fine teeth. They're not going to rip and tear your open grain woods and forcing them to flare out and rip a big piece of it off. Whereas a multi-spur bit, in my opinion and in my experience, it does. You can hit that multi-spur bit that have those self-threading tips on the end. You get that multi-spur bit onto the face of the door, and before you know it, wham! It's self-feeding because it's spiraled on the end. You get too much action on your half-inch Milwaukee, you're gonna damage that door. So I like the hole saws. Little 3/8 drill, be easy to control. I breach the other side. I go to the other side and come back through. And what am I really left with is just the core that I have to work out of the edge of the door. Out of the edge of the hole saw. Cheap, reliable, keeps you from making damage to the door. Will help prevent that. Forces you to be straight on. Then I just take a 1-inch fly bit. Can't be any easier than that. I like the ones with the wingtips because they score the face of that first. Drill right through my 2 1/8. Don't let this tool stop before you pull the tool out of the edge of the hole. Then I would bring my Porter cable template, clamp it onto the edge of the door, and use my router and clean that off. Little corner chisel. Porter cable makes those. Other people do. Square my corners off. I have a perfect hole. You can use other tools to do it. That's just the way I've done it thousands of times. So for whatever it's worth. You also then see the strike prep that's there. It will give you the center line. With cylindrical hardware, the center line of the strike and the center line of the lock are the same. With tubular hardware, it's the same. You get into mortise locks, there's no longer that perfect, the center line is adjusted. That's a different conversation. Looking at the rest of the template, there is no dust box with this hardware. I have noticed looking at the template. That is a shortcoming. This hardware, when you're spending this kind of money for solid brass levers, and they better be brass, I would fully expect a plastic dust box that would go behind the strike and finish off the installation so that you cannot see inside the hole to the stud, to the back of the frame, the fact that you've drilled through it, the whole 9 yards. This should have a dust box. And if I have a chance to mention that to the manufacturer, I'm going to. Short of that, short of it having a dust box, let's just talk about that. That latch bolt's going to go in there. So maybe what you're going to want to do in the absence of having a dust box, let's say that your jam is 3/4 thick. Let's say that my projection, if I'm trying to hold that basically 1/8 of an inch away, let's say my engagement into the frame is going to be about 3/8. I would use a router on my jam, and I would route the inside of that so that I had a clean, flat bottom installation that would, in effect, act as a dust box. Okay, I don't want the internal wall construction seeping through my strike hole into my living space. Nothing else really of note there except to say they show you where to place the center line of the holes for the strike depending on the door thickness. That would be, they don't mention it, but that would certainly be from the face of the stop is where they're referencing that. When the door comes closed, it will hit the face of the stop. That's what they're referencing there. Nothing else really on the template to discuss. Let us now move to the installation instructions. Now let's finish up the video with looking at the installation instructions. And I've looked at installation instructions for TownSteel material in the past on other locks. They are very simple and straightforward. What you literally what you see is what you're dealing with. They show the outside lever. Okay, this is the outside lever. The outside will always have the fixed rows and the no access to the heads of screws, so that you can just easily pull the trim off. So this will be the outside. So the first thing that you're going to do is install the latch bolt. That's got to go into the door first. You know, get that put in. Absolutely pre-drill your holes for the screws. You don't want to split the edge of your beautiful door. A good rule of thumb is, and what they have here are combination machine and wood thread screws. That this will work perfectly in steel frames or in wood frames. You want to pre-drill the holes to 80% of the root diameter. So you see those threads there. If you took the solid portion of the screw and take about 80% of that, that would be a perfect size for a pre-drill. If you are a professional installer, I would recommend that you consider a wire size set of drill bits, because that will give you the absolute finest incremental change from one drill bit to the next drill bit, permitting you to really do excellent work when it comes to pre-drilling material. And in addition to that, if you wanted to get even fancier, the amount of the hole, the percentage of the root size of the screw will change depending on what you're drilling into. If it's a hardwood species, I'd stick with 80%. If it is a softwood, I would probably, make that, maybe 85% or even, 90%, let's say, of the root diameter. Forgive me, I've said that backwards. I want to have a smaller hole when it's a softwood, 80%. I'm saying it, it's sounding wrong to me. So I'd want to probably use my 80% rule in a softwood. If it's a hardwood species, I probably would increase that to 90%, or even the root diameter itself, somewhere in that range, a little bit less. A little smaller hole if you're dealing with a pine edge door, or something masonite, that sort of situation. If you feel like when you're installing the screw and it's just not going in, the hole's too small. Have proper fitting screwdrivers. Absolutely do not use a screw gun. Hardware is to be installed by hand only. I will admittedly use a very small low voltage hand pistol type gun to get screws moved into position, but then I will always finish it off by hand. Now, the latch bolt goes in first. You've pre-drilled the holes. The outside trim will be next up after you place that latch supporter. Okay? And literally, it's going to work like this. Well, of course I have that backwards. Okay? I can tell you when I hold that all hand, I can rotate that, but moving the rows, that latch support does a phenomenal job. I have to really manhandle it to get it to move. That just does a great job. Absolutely. I took those two prongs and I just pinched them down after I slid it back on, and it's on there quite solidly. Okay, so that's going to be your exterior application. That's what you're going to look like. At that point, you're going to bring your spindle assembly. Okay, you've got the outside spindle, and the outside spindle is the one that has the thread on it. Let's take a closer look at that. So as you have this all put together, what you're going to do actually, at this point, that's what your trim looks like from the outside. But before you get to that point, going through the steps as they've listed here, to back up, we've prepared the door for the cutout, install the latch into the door that we've done. The next step is indeed to install the spindles. So you have the outside spindle. They're clearly showing that to be the side with the screw. I don't know why the screw would be on the exterior side, except for the fact that the way in which we need to install the material, I don't see that it would matter. I would prefer the screw to be on the inside so that I have no chance of being able to attempt modification to that from the outside. Anyway, they say that this is the outside. That's going to go right in the prep in the latch bolt, and it's not going to go any further because the machining on this is slightly smaller. So it'll be captive there. So your latch bolt's got to be in the door. This is going to go in. Then you're just going to tighten that screw with your screwdriver, and you're going to make it flush. At that point, the spindle is now captive. It's held onto the latch bolt. It's now a consolidated installation. Ouch. Okay, so I've got it turned enough where it won't move. You would, of course, tighten it all the way down. Then at that point, install the latch support. We'll be working from the outside. And that's the magic point right there where the spindle goes inside of the exterior trim receiver. Now at this point you've got a proper operating lock. Okay. Install the outside lever, step 5. Install the 2 mounting posts. These may be installed already by the factory with the rows on. They are. Install the inside lever assembly. Use the 2 mounting screws to fasten. So at this point, you're going to bring this portion. You're just going to line the holes up appropriately. Then you're going to use those 2 funny screws that are in that bag. They're going to go down. Your rose has to certainly go next, and you're going to seat that down. You'll just push it down so that it's flush. At that point, the last thing that you'll do, you're going to loosen that set screw. You'll then put it down onto the spindle and then tighten it. At that point, you have no parts left over. This we've already installed. Okay, you've got a really nice looking lock. Either side operates independent of each other, which is nice. You have independent spring return, lever return springs under each rose, which is nice. Step 7 was press the inside rose on, which we've done. Because some lever design, the rose has to go on next because some levers will not permit you to take the rose and slide it over. This would certainly be one of those designs. Loosen the set screw, tighten the set screw. Check for correct operation before closing or locking the door. Absolutely. Make sure everything fits. Don't over-tighten anything. You'll find that when you over-tighten a lock, it just doesn't work correctly, and that there is indeed a sweet spot. I like to, when I install tubular locks like this, I definitely like to have thread lock material with me, liquid thread lock. There is some on this. It absolutely helps the longevity of the installation. I do that for clients all the time. This manufacturer already applies the thread lock to their material because these handles do get loose with time. Reviewing this lock, the only thing I can say that I would prefer is that they would have a dust box. I would not hesitate to use this lock in my own application. There are a lot of options when it comes to manufacturers of residential tubular locks, that's to be sure. It is quite advantageous that you can match your exterior lever trim to your interior lever trim. Another advantage of TownSteel is that they have a substantial available list of options when it comes to levers, which is somewhat the day and age that we're living in, which was not always the case. There was once upon a time there were not lots of options. Well, that's changed, thankfully. The customer service department over at Townline is, for the most part, quite responsive. The quality of their material is good. When they were first introduced to me, their selling point or their calling card was ligature-resistant hardware, hardware that would be used in psychiatric applications. The world may or may not necessarily need another tubular lock available to you, but the world certainly needs hardware that's going to help us in terms of society and keeping society safe and evolving with the changing times. And TownSteel has an absolute very broad spectrum of available ligature-resistant products. So if you have any exposure to requirements of that, you might want to familiarize yourself with their catalog. That you can find below this video to the manufacturer's page. There is a link to the manufacturer's page on our site where you can pull up the full product catalog. You can pull up not only all the TownSteel products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website. And if you have any questions on the TownSteel, this is their part number. It's a TLL passage with an Essen lever with a low projection rose in a satin chrome finish, 2 3/8 backset. If you want 2 3/4, just specify 2 3/4. If you're not sure what backset you need, find out before you order them. They're not, I know it sounds strange, but TownSteel's not just going to exchange latch bolts in the sense that they've got to be shipped back. They're probably going to be a restocking fee. You're probably going to have to pay some money. It's a hassle. It does happen, and we will assist you if that needs to occur, of course. But be mindful that not necessarily every vendor, not necessarily every manufacturer understands, hey, I made a mistake. I have the wrong backset. Just help me here. You guys have bushels of these. Well, they really want you to get it right the first time. Do take a moment to determine the proper backset. If you are drilling the holes, measure your style. You know, if you have 5-inch stiles or 4 3/4 stiles, you're going to want 2 3/8. You're going to want to also check the catalog and make sure what is the outside diameter of my rose. Where is that going to come into play? If you've got 6-inch stiles, yeah, I would look at 2 3/4 backset. I would want to center that trim as best as I can, but then also be mindful. What does my trim do in terms of its shape and how it interacts with the rest of the opening, like the door? Is there raised molding on your door? Are you going to have some sort of a conflict with your lever? The positioning of the hardware on the door style is as crucial as how the door will behave when it's once installed on the door. If you have any questions on this lock or any other TownSteel product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.